Hello and welcome back. This is the fourth section where we will be looking into some of the technical questions which you would be asked in your UI5 or Fiori interviews. So basically, I have categorized the questions into 5 categories. There will be some basic questions. These are like concepts which you should be aware about when you are saying that you can work as a UI5 consultant or senior consultant. Then there are component-based questions regarding a lot of component which is given in the library. There will be questions about individual components or the top used components and the concept behind that, like data binding or the MVC pattern. Then there will be deployment, how when you're pushing your application to SAP or when you're pushing it in SAP HANA, when it is hosted in SAP HANA or it's relying in SAP HANA, how you perform those activity or questions regarding the steps or process. Then there will be some of the questions regarding the support project when you do enhancement on some of the existing applications. So those type of questions will be asked when you are going in a support project. If you are getting too much requirement of debugging, finding the problems, then you will be asked how to debug, how to put debugging points and all those questions. And finally, there will be like a requirement level. If you are going into customer workshops to get the requirement, then how you do that, perform that. So this is mostly functional oriented or little for higher developer role who go into the customer workshop, the client facing customers, asking questions to your customers and getting the requirement. And you will be basically asked or judged depending on what activity you will be performed in all of these 5 categories. So what we will do is we will start with some of the questionnaires from the basics, UI5 components, deployment, support level, and then project level. So majority of the questions will be these 3, the top 3, which is basics, UI5 component and concepts and deployment. There are a lot of technology involved in UI5. You have your JavaScript, HTML, CSS3. Your library itself has a lot of good frame questions which will be asked. And then you also have a BAP integration aspect, OData aspect, JSON aspect. So there's a lot of questions which can be formulated. I will be covering top 30 to 40 questions combining all of these 5 categories. So this section is going to be a little longer, and I will like to give you a generic frame as well at the end, so you can prepare for your interviews, which can be also covering some of the questions which is outside of this session. So let's go ahead and start with the basic questionnaires and what are they going to be and how you will be answering them. So let's move on to the next question. What are all types of views available in SAP UI5? So the type of view which are available in SAP UI5 is JavaScript views, XML views, you have JSON views, and we can also create HTML views. So HTML5 based views can also be created here. Now, one question which will be asked here is, what views will you prefer and why? Now, the answer to this question is tricky because you can say JavaScript or you say XML. Now, from my experience, I would say JavaScript. If you have experience with XML more, then you say XML, because then they will be starting to question why. And for me, if I would ask the question that why I would like to create a JavaScript view compared to XML, then I would say that if you are going Eclipse, then that is the default view which appears, and I can be much more flexible in JavaScript to create my user interface. And if I answered XML, then I have to justify that XML views are easy to create. It's much easier to navigate. It's like a tree. And also in standard SAP library, most of the code I can get in XML, and most of the applications are built with XML Fiori based application. So this is how you answer this question, and this is the answer. Now the next question is, what is SAP UI5 bootstrapping? Now bootstrapping, as we all know, if some of you are not aware about what it is bootstrapping, Bootstrapping is a common term which is used when you are loading the libraries. When a lot of library components are getting loaded to your front end UI browser, which is basically your web browser, the session which you have open, when you hit a URL and that URL is having a lot of libraries and all the libraries and components are getting loaded in your browser, that process is called bootstrapping. In UI5 world as well, if you see your index application, mostly initially you are loading the UI5 core, and this core library will in turn load a lot of library within your browser, and this library will be utilized in your application itself. So that process is bootstrapping. In a short term, bootstrapping is the process of loading your UI5 library. Now, in the bootstrapping process, you might be writing what specific libraries you are loading. It may be just sap.m, it can be sap.ui.commons, it can be sap.m UI commons plus viz plus a lot of other libraries like mak and a lot of other things as well. So sometimes it involves loading of multiple things. Now, this is from a side note, I can say that this point or bootstrapping takes a lot of time in your browser. If you are working, then it will take a lot of time to load those libraries. It depends. The speed can, the app opening time can be 3 to 5 seconds based on the internet speed. And sometimes they ask, okay, how much time it takes? Then you can say it might take time depending on what network speed is there. Normally, the size of this library are about 15 megabyte plus. So this will be like what the size will be, and depending on your network speed, it will be loaded. So it will take at least 3 seconds to load, and also sometimes it also takes 7 seconds to 10 seconds as well to load the entire library in your browser. And also they will mention what is the best practice to make bootstrapping process cut short in time. And you can say use only those library, or mention to get only those library which are necessary in the application. If I'm not using SAP UI Commons, if I'm not using any part of the visualization library, then I should not include it in my bootstrapping, which is the part of the script in the index page, which basically load my library. And also I can take advantage of a concept called lazy loading. So in our website also, in UI5 CN, you might have experienced that not all the images are coming to your browser at once. And if you scroll down, then only your images will be appearing. That is the lazy loading library which we have put to speed up the performance of the website. And what it does is it will increase the time it takes to load and only deliver those content which are necessary. And over the time, it will try to load new components which is required or might be required for further use for the user. So it cuts short the load time. So you can use either lazy loading, and also you can use only those specific libraries which is required. So some other versions are you try to load a lot of libraries asynchronously, and you have a loader as well. So the libraries is loaded asynchronously, but for the UI5 app to start, you need to have the core library present, and that is the essential part. And also if you are seeing a screen, then all the components which is in that particular screen or the first view should be also loaded or downloaded from the repository, and you have it in your UI to see your application or start your application. So they might ask you further questions on how can this bootstrapping process be reduced in time, how the application initial load time can be reduced, and you answer that smartly, and you say lazy loading. I will try to make a lot of library components load asynchronously, which is what is lazy loading, and this will reduce the initial load time, and I will only use the library which is necessary for my application. So this is the answer to this question. So this question is a very good question, and you might get it very often. And I think there's one more questions of MVC which I see, and there are multiple questions which are famous, but this is one of my favorite question. bootstrapping. Now the next question is, what is SAP Fiori? How it is different from SAP UI5? The answer is pretty simple. SAP Fiori is the ready-made application on top of SAP UI5. SAP Fiori is application suite which is made by SAP themselves, and they are utilizing SAP UI5 library framework to make this application. So that is short and sweet answer for what is SAP Fiori and how it's different from SAP UI5. And then the question is, what is OpenUI5 and how it is different from SAP UI5 or SAP UI5? Then the answer is OpenUI5 is the open source version of UI5 library, and SAP UI5 is the SAP version of UI5 library, and you need to have a license from SAP to use SAP UI5 for commercial purpose, and for OpenUI5 you don't need a license. There are some libraries like Viz which is only present in SAP UI5. There will be a lot of library which is only present in SAP UI5 and not present in OpenUI5 version as well. So that is also supports your answer. So OpenUI5 is a free version which is you can try out and use it for commercial purpose as well. SAP UI5 cannot be used for commercial purpose unless you have a license from SAP. That is the main difference. Now the next question is, what is the main difference between OData model and JSON model? So this is a trick question because most of the time as a developer, you might have used OData model to get your JSON data within your application. But speaking in a theoretical sense, your JSON model is considered to be a client-side model and your OData model is considered to be a server-side model. So JSON model is utilized in your UI5 applications, the front-end application, and stays there. But the OData model stays in the server and you only see the JSON record or the data which you requested for. So you can actually further query in this OData model which relies on your client side of the server. Most of the time you are using your NetViewer gateway server or HANA server, and that OData model relies there. You can query that model with deep data, getting out details or line item details, or also filtering the data there. So this OData model actually is residing in your server side, and you can actually further query it to get less data, or can also get more data by having some of the deep queries written on the server. If you have implemented the OData model properly and you have the deep extraction of the data, then you can also see the line item details with the header details. So simply put, OData model is a server-side model and JSON model is a client-side model. And at the end, we are basically using JSON to bind the data model in our UI5 application. And also in UI5 application, we use SAP UI5 model, which is a JSON model. You can also have XML model. There are different versions of model which will be available as an object in sap.ui.getCore, and you can say get model. This command or the function chain of the command you might be remembering, get model, and then you will see the model, and then you say get data, and sometimes the model is XML, sometimes JSON, but predominantly it is JSON model which we bind to the front end of the application. So this JSON model is the client side model. And they might sometimes ask you, what is JSON full form? What does it stand for? JSON is JavaScript object notation, and OData is open data format, which is developed by Microsoft. And this is good to understand or know. Now the next question is, what all types of data models available in SAP UI5? So this is what exactly we also spoke about. So once the interviewer is asking this question, then you can basically reply there are 4 types of data models, because we only discussed about OData and XML models. But when it comes to implementation, we have basically JSON model, which is predominantly used in your application, mostly to store your data, which is coming from your backend. Then you have your OData model. So these are the data models which stores the data which is basically in your server side. So basically you are having a data model in your server side, and you are also having in client side a object which can actually extract data. So it's an abstraction. So to explain you, the model is basically in the server. In the front end or your application, you are having just the model, which is an object which can basically contact that server model and give you data in a filter format, or can you give you a data with a deep query by getting more records of the line item as well, and also can give you the exact data or the row which you are referring to. So we have a OData model which basically is stored in the server, and you're having just an object in the front end. Then there's a resource model. So this resource model is basically the model which is used for the I18N file, which is the text file for the language conversion. So these are the resource models. So if you are in ABAP, previously working as a ABAPer, you might have seen there is a space where you basically write the language conversion, and the resource model basically holds that in your front-end application as well. And that is the job of resource model, and you will be utilizing that model to store the text data. Then you have also XML model, and XML model is used to store small data, and it's very rarely used. Now, the main objective or the main reason for that is when you are representing a data in JSON compared to in XML, the number of storage you are doing to store the exact data in JSON is less, because in XML you have to have a starting tag, ending tag. If there are like thousands of columns, then you have to write the tags thousands of time. But in JSON, you just store the key value pair of the data. So the length of the storage or the size of the storage is less in JSON. So you use it predominantly. We don't use XML data because it's basically takes much higher space in storage, and we use it very rarely in UI5 application development. We mostly use JSON models, which are in the client side or the browser side, and we basically put data onto the JSON model with two-way binding. We have the OData model on the server side. We do use the OData object in the client side to get those data, and it also supports two-way binding. And we have the resource model, which basically stored the text data. Mostly an example is I18N for the language conversion. So this is the answer to the question. This is a very tricky question as well, and you have to answer it properly if your concepts are clear. I hope your concepts are now clear. Now let's see the next question. This is the last question for the basics session, and then the question is, explain MVC architecture in SAP UI5. So MVC is a model view control. You can have one model, one view and control. If you are having this model view control, the model stores data, the view only shows or represent or basically contains the UI components which is to be represented in UI, and all the logics are actually present in the control. So in your view, you are not writing any function which does any operation which should be put in the control, and in the control you are not creating or writing any code which is of a UI element which need to be rendered. So that is the pattern. You have model view control where the appropriate activity need to perform in the appropriate place. So model is for data, view is for view elements, and component is for the business logic to be processed. Now there is multiple variation is MV star, and then those are for Angular world. So if your technical interviewer is digging down, you can say, okay, I don't know much about MV star because it's a type of architecture which is used in Angular. And then the question comes in, can there be more than one view to a controller, or can there be more than one controller to a view. So you can say that the possibility of having more than one view to a controller is acceptable, but having more controller for a view is unacceptable, because in the case where you have n number of views, then some of the views are acting as a fragments, and the fragments actually opens up when you press some functionality in the controller. So those are also types of questions. We will be covering fragment in the concepts and components as well, but this is some of the pointers from MVC they can take you to as well. So these are basically 10 top questions, interview questions for SAP UI5 and Fiori interviews, and this is the basic questions. And there will be a lot of questions I will be covering, but these are the basic questions. If you have any queries, or if you think that some of the answers which I have given can be much better from your side, if you are too much experienced and want to share, you can use the Discuss forum and contact me for letting some of the questions come out from your side as well. So let's catch up in the next section, where we will be seeing more interview technical questions for SAP UI5 and Fiori interviews. Thank you for watching. Hey there, check out UI5CN for awesome hands-on courses on enterprise technologies like SAP and more. To watch similar videos, subscribe to UI5CN YouTube channel.